President Nixon spoke with Bob Haldeman 3 days after the Watergate break-in. When investigators listened to the tapes, there was an 18.5-minute gap in that recording from June 20, 1972. It became one of the biggest mysteries of Watergate. Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Wood, said she erased the tape accidentally by stepping on a pedal while reaching for the telephone. Now, after a comprehensive review, two men think they know who really did it. Phil Houston is a former CIA interrogator, and James Robenalt is a Nixon historian. Welcome.
Thank you, James.
Glad to be here.
So, who did it?
Well, we think all the evidence shows that Nixon actually erased the tape originally, sometime in July of 1973.
What's the evidence?
The evidence is that you start with Rosemary Wood on October 1, 1973. She's listening to the tape. She answers the phone. She says she puts the record button down. That can't do anything. The experts now tell us that would have done nothing. It would not have created a buzz. She gets off the phone, she stops it, rewinds, comes back, there's a buzz. So it's already there in the tape. She didn't do it. She couldn't have done it. To cause the erasure, she had to do two fingers down on two different buttons simultaneously. She never said she did that. So she did not erase it. It was already there.
What would you add to that, Phil?
Well, when we reviewed Nixon's grand jury testimony, which was released just a couple of years ago, there's a high volume of deception, Charlie, whenever he's asked about his involvement with the tapes.
So in other words,
yeah, like what? When you say high volume of deception, for instance, give us some examples.
There's a ton of what we call evasion behaviors. So, for example, probably 60–70% of the questions he starts by saying, well, I don't recall, or I don't recall specifically. Many things he should recall.
Do you think he had help?
Yeah. The evidence suggests that Haig was assisting him in doing this, because Rosemary Wood walks into the president the day that she does this accident and says, I think I did this. An hour later, Haig and Nixon get in a car, leave the White House, and drive around Washington for 2 hours. Now, Nixon says, we were talking about Agnew's resignation. Right. No doubt they were. It would happen on October 10th. But clearly they were saying she thinks she did it. And from that point forward, somebody went back and did 5 to 9 erasures to get rid of the entire conversation.
And Haig's role at that time was?
He was the chief of staff. He replaced Bob Haldeman. He had left the military, but he was still going around the White House during this period of time asking people to take the fall.
And what has he said about it? He must have been raised before with Haig, so he obviously denied this before he died.
Well, Nixon did something very, very interesting in his grand jury testimony. When he was asked a rather benign question, he stopped Mr. Davis and said, you're probably wondering why I've been spending so much time with Mr. Haig, to include I've taken a 2 hour, hour and a half, or 2 hour car ride with him, but I just want to let you know you have nothing to worry about, and don't worry about us, and all we talked about in the car ride was Agnew's resignation.
Did it say anything to either of you that they even took such a long car ride? Because at the time, Haig at one point said there are sinister forces at work here. He had no idea how this could have happened.
Right. First of all, they had to get out of the White House, and that tells you something.
Because they were worried about...
yeah, I mean, the taping system, the mics had been cut, right. So they're leaving because they're worried that maybe somebody was going to tape what they said. And they were talking about Agnew, but they were also, Watergate was front and center at that point, and they were very worried about a lot of things, but this was front and center.
I've often wondered, Jim, why not just erase the whole tape as opposed to leaving a gap which makes it look suspicious? Why not just erase the whole thing and say, I don't know anything about anything?
Well, the better question for him was, why didn't you destroy the tapes?
Yes.
I mean, John Connolly said, take them out into the Rose Garden and burn them. Yeah. But he only got rid of the Watergate portion of it.
Quickly, why did it take so long to reach this conclusion?
Because it dropped. As soon as Nixon resigned, nobody was indicted. There was no criminal proceeding. It totally dropped. Everybody's looked at, can we technically recover this? Nobody's looked at all the circumstances and talked to the experts who actually were talked to back at the time, but never had their 5 minutes, in front of everybody.
And now with this new revelation, does it change anything, do you think?
Yeah, I think, to me, this is further evidence that the president was in what we call a loss frame. John Dean and I do a CLE for attorneys, and we explain the psychology of cover-up. When you have two lost situations, like Bill Clinton, I've got to say something bad, you will act irrationally. There's a lot of psychology, and this was Richard Nixon acting irrationally.
Great story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.